Published 7:48 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, the 10th of July 2018. Updated 3:58 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, the 11th of July 2018. Theresa May has said she is looking forward to hosting the president, despite him speaking of turmoil in Britain. The U.S. president risked sparking a major diplomatic row after he said his meeting with Russian leader Vladimir Putin will be easier than meeting Mrs. May, and he praised his friend, Boris Johnson, who dramatically quit the government yesterday over Brexit, and suggested he could meet him during the trip. But speaking at a summit with German Chancellor Angela Merkel in London last night, the PM hit back, saying she has much to talk to Mr. Trump about. Asked directly about his incendiary comments, she said, "I am looking forward to seeing President Trump not only at the NATO summit in the next couple of days but also when he comes to the UK. There is much for us to discuss." President Donald Trump and Melania Trump walked down the stairs during their arrival on Air Force One at Melsbroek Air Base in Brussels. Air Force One is shown on the tarmac at Brussels Military Airport in Belgium last night. Speaking to the media alongside before leaving the US, Donald Trump said it was up to the people of Britain to decide whether Mrs. May stayed on as PM. Speaking at a summit with German Chancellor Angela Merkel in London last night, the PM hit back, saying she has much to talk to Donald Trump about. President Trump and Russia's President Vladimir pictured in Da Nang, Vietnam in November 2017. Trump risked sparking a diplomatic incident by saying the UK is in turmoil, and his showdown with Vladimir Putin will be easier than meeting Theresa May. She added, "We will be talking positively about how we can continue to work together in our special relationship for the good of people living in the UK and the United States and, actually, for the wider good." There are already fears of tensions over the trip, with many thousands of demonstrators expected to descend on the streets of London in protest. The US leader has sparked fury among Britons after he publicly clashed with Mrs. May over criticism of crime levels in London, the performance of the NHS, and retweeting posts from a far-right group. Downing Street insisted they were relaxed about the intervention, pointing out that Mr. Trump also stressed his very good relations with Mrs. May. A spokesman said the president was being humorous with his remark about the Putin meeting, but the jibes will fuel concerns that the visit will be a diplomatic minefield. Speaking to journalists as he set off for Europe, Mr. Trump said there were a lot of things going on in the UK at the moment and the country seemed to be somewhat in turmoil. "The UK certainly has a lot of things going on," he said. "Boris Johnson's a friend of mine. He's been very, very nice to me. Very supportive. Americans living in Britain have been warned to keep a low profile during Donald Trump's visit to avoid being caught up in violent protests." The U.S. Embassy issued the advice on Tuesday ahead of the president's arrival on Thursday for talks with Prime Minister Theresa May. Embassy staff said numerous demonstrations were planned for Thursday to Saturday, with the majority around central London on Friday. Americans were advised to keep a low profile, be aware of your surroundings, and monitor local media during Trump's visit. Exercise caution if unexpectedly in the vicinity of large gatherings that may become violent, it said. Tens of thousands are expected to take to the streets in protest of Trump's policies, but there is no indication they will be anything but peaceful. "And maybe we'll speak to him when I get over there. I like Boris Johnson. I've always liked him." Asked by DailyMail.com whether Mrs. May should continue as PM, Mr. Trump said, "That is up to the people." However, he added that he had very good relationship with Mrs. May. Mr. Trump joked that his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin might be the easiest leg of his trip to Europe. "So I have NATO, I have the UK, that's a situation with turmoil. And I have Putin. Frankly, Putin may be the easiest of all." On his trip to Europe, he added, "It's going to be an interesting time in the UK and an interesting time at NATO. We will work it out and all countries will be happy. We do have a lot of allies, but we cannot be taken advantage of. We are being taken advantage of by the European Union. We spend 75% on NATO and frankly, it helps them more than it helps us." Labour MP Madeleine Moon, a champion of anti-Brexit group Best for Britain, said Mr. Trump's remarks showed the dangers of relying on the US. "This is a wake-up call and a look into the future we face if Brexit goes ahead," she said. "We have a tight relationship with our allies in the EU, yet this government is tearing us away from them just as Trump is making a mockery of our so-called special relationship." Mr. Trump said Boris Johnson, pictured leaving his London home yesterday, was a friend, and suggested he could meet up with him in the UK. The US president will meet Mrs. May at her Chequers country residence, pictured, on Friday rather than in Downing Street. The PM's official spokesman played down the idea of a spat, saying it was obviously positive for the UK that the former Foreign Secretary had a good relationship with the president. The spokesman also suggested the president was being humorous in his comment about the Putin meeting. It is important for the special relationship which the US and UK have that we have a strong relationship at a political level, and I know Jeremy Hunt is looking forward forging his own relationships with his US compatriots, the spokesman said. Pressed on whether Mr. Trump was right to say Britain is in turmoil, the spokesman said, I think the PM is looking forward to showing the president the UK and is confident he will leave with a very positive impression. He will be meeting with British businesses and be seeing security and defense capabilities. Asked about Mrs. May and Mr. Trump's relationship, the spokesman said, I think the president himself said he has a very good relationship with the Prime Minister and I wouldn't disagree with that. Mr. Trump will not make any public appearances in London when he comes to the UK next week, amid a massive security operation. The US President and First Lady Melania will touch down in Britain on Thursday for his first visit since entering the White House. Huge protests have been threatened that could see 50,000 take to the streets of the capital, while a big orange baby Trump blimp has been given permission to fly. The bill for the American leader's three-day trip is expected to be around £30 million as 10,000 police officers are deployed to keep the U.S. commander-in-chief from trouble, revealed. Full details of Trump's UK trip. U.S. President won't make any public appearances in London. Donald Trump will not make any public appearances in London when he comes to the UK this week, amid a massive security operation. The U.S. President and First Lady Melania will touch down in Britain on Thursday for his first visit since entering the White House. Huge protests have been threatened that could see 50,000 take to the streets of the Capitol, while a big orange baby Trump blimp has been given permission to fly. The bill for the American leader's three-day trip is expected to be around £30 million as 10,000 police officers are deployed to keep the U.S. commander-in-chief from trouble. Downing Street has revealed some details about the visit by Donald Trump and the First Lady to the UK this week. Sunbathers were given the shock of their lives on Monday afternoon as two V-22 Ospreys flew over Regent's Park as part of drills, sending grass and debris flying through the air. Trump's £1.2 million Cadillac, the Beast, has been flown over in one of the world's largest military planes, the Super Galaxy C-5. Meanwhile, U.S. Navy carrier, the gigantic USS Harry S. Truman, will dock in the South Coast as backup. The details of the long-awaited visit issued by Downing Street last week confirmed that Mr. Trump will spend only minimal time in London. Instead, he will be feted by Mrs. May at a dinner for business leaders being held on Thursday night at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, the ancestral home of his hero Winston Churchill. The next day he will have tea with the Queen at Windsor Castle and talks with the Prime Minister at her country retreat, Chequers. Work has begun to set up a £30 million ring of steel around Regent's Park, where the U.S. president will stay, in anticipation of widespread protests against the trip. Mrs. Trump, meanwhile, will be given her own sightseeing tour, hosted by Theresa May's husband Philip. It has also emerged that Mr. Trump will spend the majority of his three-day trip in Scotland, where his mother was born and where he owns two golf courses. Downing Street denied the itinerary was deliberately designed to shield Mr. Trump from the public. A spokesman pointed out that several other leading figures had been hosted at Chequers in the past, including U.S. Presidents Richard Nixon and George W. Bush, and, last year, French President Emmanuel Macron.